Hello gorgeous people, how are you all doing today? I hope you are well. I'm a bit warm. It's quite a warm day again, so I'm going to be slugging my water. Right, so today I'm going to try and make this a bit of a quickie. Here's hoping. I thought I'd talk about fabrics and fabric choices because I'm at that stage where that's exactly what I'm going to be doing over the next few weeks or so. Obviously, your fabric choices, so I'm going to be talking about fabric in terms of weight, pattern, design, colour, scale, all sorts of things, but going quickly. It will depend on the project that you're doing. I'm going to be talking specifically today in terms of patchworking, so for making my little lavender bags. Here's one. I made it last year, so it's got a patchworked front and then one solid piece on the back. I didn't sell this. It's a slight second, because for me this angle here, it just wasn't straight enough, so this is mine. 1 year on, it still smells gorgeous. I've got it out for a couple of reasons. One, to explain what I'm talking about today, but also so you can see, but it's also about the feel of fabric. That's really important to me. So everything I talk about today is what I do for my patchworks, for my lavender bags. This applies to patchwork if you're then going to make a big patchwork and a quilt. This is what I do for my bunting, so I've got a few bits of bunting out that I've made already. So for example, these are going to alternate. These are all kind of sort of like almost antique flowers. Gorgeous, double-sided. This is one with a slightly large, oops, not that one. Oh, it will do as well, but a slightly larger flower. So you can see big roses or whatever, big flowers, small flowers, and then this is very spriggy. We might say spriggy. So, first things first, fabric choice. I work almost exclusively in cotton. I like the feel of it, I like the natural fibre. Occasionally, as I have done with my Liberty stuff, occasionally silk, but rarely, mostly cotton. I like cotton, it's a good robust material, so especially say with the bunting, if it's going to go in the garden, and I sew them into really thick webbing, if it's going to go into the garden and be flapped and flapped and flapped in the breeze, yeah, it's good and strong and robust. It feels lovely. I specifically use cotton poplin. Cotton poplin, here's a little piece of cotton poplin. It's a close weave. It's got a lovely smooth feel to it. So that's partly because of the close weave, and it's also partly because the fibre, the cotton fibre, is quite a fine fibre. So it's got a lovely smooth feel to it, but also the great thing about poplin is it can take a print, because this is printed on, it's not, this design isn't woven in, it's printed on. It can take a print really well. You get very sort of distinct edges, colours, all of that sort of thing. So I prefer a cotton poplin. There are all sorts of fabrics out there in the world, of course there are. So for example, this is it's sort of like it's a take on ticking, but this is upholstery weight. I don't know if we can get a sense. This is the bed that I made for Charlotte Bronte years ago. I used to have oh, we're on the back, aren't we? That's good, because I want the envelope to show you the thickness. I used to have a bed inside it, loose cover, so I can take it off to wash it. But I don't know if you can, like, even from the noise, you get a sense of the thickness. It's really thick, really strong, perfect for a dog bed, a sofa, cushions, anything. But for hang on a sec, but for a quilt or for the lavender bags, it's just too thick. And one of the things with the lavender bags, which is why I've got this one out, is the way I use my lavender bags, obviously put them in the wardrobe, in my drawers, scent the wardrobe, but I often have one out, I have it in my lap, especially if I've got a day where I'm doing emails and phone calls that I'm not looking forward to, that I don't like. I mentioned this a while back, that I really don't like making phone calls if it's not to a really good friend. Those phone calls are great. So I keep it in my lap, and if I feel myself getting a bit wound up and a bit tense, I can just either stroke it in my lap, I'm on the phone, stroke, 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 or I can give it a scrudge, I can release the scent, or after the phone call, or if I'm on hold, I can scrudge it and just put it to my face. It's soft, it's gentle, it smells gorgeous. It's my little kind of comfort bag, my little calming bag. So I don't want to use a really thick, heavy upholstery. I mean, this is really thick. It's almost sort of like canvas. I don't want to use that because it's not going to feel so nice in my hands. That's one reason. But also I think just it's a more delicate item. Let's give it a delicate fabric. But we don't want to go too delicate. So for example, I have, this is Liberty. It's pretty, isn't it? So this is one of Liberty's really famous things. It's called Tana Lawn, T-A-N-A, new word, L-A-W-N if you're new to it. Tana Lawn. It's their trademarked thing. It's cotton, but it's incredibly fine. It's so soft, it almost feels like silk. It's so fine. I wouldn't use a lot of cotton, particularly in dressmaking, although I've got cotton dress on. I find cotton it can be a little bit too rigid in dressmaking, but Tana Lawn, because it is so soft, it will drape, so it's lovely for making a blouse, top, what have you. And I have used it in my lavender bags, but I wouldn't use this one because this one is so pale. The lavender in the bag is going to show through, and the lavender is grey, so actually it's going to end up looking a bit grubby. Even though it's not, it's going to look grubby. And the other thing is, with something as fine as a lawn, and even to a degree with silk, excuse me, is if you haven't been really meticulous with processing your lavender, as in just taking off the flowers and not getting any sort of leafy bits, twiggy bits, stalky bits in, if you've got any of those little bits left, they won't poke through the lawn. It's not like a feather in a feather cushion where you get feathers poking through, but they'll just be pokey enough so that if you put it to your face, even in your hands, you could feel the roughness. So if you are going to use a lawn, I suggest a much darker print, and just be really meticulous when you're harvesting your lavender blooms so that it's just the little flower heads and no twiggy stalky bits. So that's my weight of fabric. I'm going for cotton, and I'm going for, if you go into a shop and just ask for their quilting weight cottons, they'll probably have a whole section. For those of you who are new to this, I know tons of you are quilters. This is me taking coals to Newcastle, isn't it? But if you're new to this game, ask for the quilting weight cottons or their cotton poplins, and hopefully you'll be shown to a whole rainbow, a whole palette of gorgeous fabrics to choose from, play with, etc. Now, in terms of colour, obviously colour is a completely individual thing, isn't it? You have your preferred colours, you have colours you dislike. I'm not a huge fan of yellow, however, I've got ready here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different yellows. Because yellow is quite popular. In the past, when I have made bags, I might make 4 or 5 in yellows, and the rest are in greens and blues and lilacs. The yellows sell out first, so it's like, okay, duly noted, I'll make more in the yellows. you know, there are no rules in terms of what you put together. You could go for one colour, but all sorts of different patterns in that one colour. You might feel like, I'm going to try and show you two really obvious ones now. You see how I've tried to pick a day with good light for this. This has got more of a mustardy yellow, and that's more of an acid bright yellow. For me, that's a little bit of a clash. Well, put it this way, it's a clash in a small item like the lavender bag. If I was doing a quilt, I wouldn't mind the clash so much because it's so huge. It sort of all merges into one. If you want to use more than one colour, you could always, I was going to actually paint a colour wheel for you, but actually I looked online to check, and there are tons of colour wheels online. If you go to Colour Wheel Theory online, it'll bring up a colour wheel and it'll explain the theory of complementing colours and clashing colours. You may want to clash your colours on purpose. I do occasionally, but I tend to like working with either one colour. I tend to like working with one colour and lots of different shades, different designs in that colour. So this, for me, this little selection, that's actually very typical for me for lavender bags. Bunting is a bit different because I like each flag to show, as it were. So I will use contrasting and sometimes clashing colours. So each and every pennant gets to be a star. But again, because of the scale of it, having those contrasts and those clashes, one's eye copes with it better because it's a bigger thing, if that makes sense. I hope it makes sense. So talking of clashing or not, I'm going to come to scale specifically in a second, but just in terms of clashing, you might like to clash. I tend not to. So I've got this fabric. Okay, so first of all, in terms of colour, it's pretty bright on a black background. Black is not something I use a lot of, but we can see it's pretty bright. Actually, it's gorgeous. It's really lovely fabric. I don't know what to do with it yet. I'm going to think of something. It's not going to go into lavender bags though. So yeah, we've got this bright, and it's quite a modern feeling looking. Let me open up a bit more. It's a scrap. It's quite a sort of a modern take on a floral print. Now, if I was to take, say, my usual style, which is that kind of slightly vintage, faded, ditzy florals, if I put those two together, it just doesn't work, does it? It just does not work. The colours are clashing, the styles are clashing. We've got modern, we've got vintage. The scale is clashing. These are huge prints. This is tiny. None of it's working. So that's something else you can think about when you're putting your fabrics together, is you might start off with, I think one of the easiest ways to start is with colour. You might choose two colours. You might have yellows and pinks. You might have blues and greens. So you've got all your colours. You're happy with your colours. Then in terms of the fabrics, the actual pattern is, think about the scale. So for example, can't wait to work with these. I've got this beautiful fabric with the stripe, with some of my favourite colours, that sort of fawny grey, the dusky rose pink. I don't know how much it's going to pick up, but there's a sort of faint, where the leaves are, it's almost a sort of a faint sage colour. And then I've got a couple more fabrics from exactly the same range. So quite often fabric designers, they'll bring out a range in one go where all the fabrics are going to tone in with each other. So a colour from this will be picked up in all the other fabrics. I'll show you. So you can see how the fawn stripe is picked up in the background of this one, and then we've got the same sort of dusky pink. Obviously this one is on quite a bigger scale. Back to the lavender bag. I like to play so that I don't use the same scale in every piece. If I use the same scale in every piece, they're all just going to blend and merge and kind of look the same. So you can see these flowers are smaller, they're a bit sort of almost sort of like more faded, and then these flowers are a bit bigger. And then these flowers, so these are 3 different fabrics, but you can see how the pinks, all the pinks are toning with each other. And again, picking up on the back, that pink is a similar pink. So we're toning all the colours in with each other, but I'm just popping different scales in so that each little square, it sort of stands out for itself, but it doesn't jar. And this would be a great example. Let me put them right next to each other. So in terms of colour and tone of colour, perfect. And then we've got different scale, so each one has a chance to stand out. And like I said, I've got more in the same range, but this one, the background is a kind of almost a baby pink. For me, I'm sorry, that doesn't work quite so well as this one with the fawn background. And I've got a piece in with a sort of almost eau de Nil background. And you see how, oh no, that doesn't work. But it might work with that. That would work together, except they're both the same scale. Are they fighting? So yeah, if you're, you know, you've got your different array of colours, tonally they all work with each other. There's no clash in terms of, obviously all these ones that I've just shown you, they sort of feel vintage, don't they? Again, putting it next to that modern one. So you might go, oh, you got pink here and you got pink here, but it just, there's no way they're ever going to work together unless, like I said, you purposely want to clash them. I've got another one here that's also quite modern feeling. No, not going to work. No, not going to work. If you found, I think it's really useful as well, if you found a lovely bit of fabric, say you love this fabric and this is the one you want to work with, take it to the shop when you go to the shop. Perhaps sit with a colour wheel at home first and work out which colour is going to complement this by looking on, find this orangey peach background on your colour wheel, go to the opposite side to find your complementary colour, or go one side and the other side, just one way. That will work together too. Yum, yum, yum. So I mentioned with these about how I'm going to play with scale a bit in terms of these yellows. Will give a good example too. So this one is quite busy. This one is also quite busy, but the scale is larger. So I think those two work well together because, yes, they're both really busy, but when they're next to each other, they're still distinct. We can still appreciate both pieces. How am I gonna, if I've got those two together, how can I tone them down? I could go for something like this. It's hard because I'm holding fabrics. If I put them together, I muffle the microphone. But if I bring this one in with them, you see this is slightly calmer in terms of there's less design, there's less per square inch, as it were, there's less going on. So when they're together, yeah, I think they work together. I would play with that a bit more. So colour, weight of fabric, colour, scale. Just one more thing. I told you this is going to be a quickie today. I've got a little trick and tip to show you in terms of trying to work out, you know, when we're working with scale, we can use this. This is quite a good example. I had got out of this. this is really jolly. That's been cut for bunting. So with the bunting, I can kind of go with a slightly larger scale. So this is almost like from a distance, it might look like a polka dot. When you get close, oh, it's stars. Slightly larger scale because each piece is slightly larger than those. These, I work in, these start off as 10 centimetre squares. By the time they're sewn up, they're 8 centimetres each. So I've got this gorgeous fabric. I can't remember where this came from. Is it little violets? I don't know. I love this fabric despite the yellow. You might think, oh, that would be gorgeous for your lavender bags. It might do, if I open it up a bit more, it might do for one of the backs, but I wouldn't use it for one of the squares because the scale is too big. Now, if you can't do it by eye, this is my little hint and tip for you, and I hope you'll like this. I think it's really useful. I do it by eye now, excuse me. I've been doing it long enough. And like I said, I know tons of you out there are quilters. This is going to be so boring for you. You've probably turned off already. Hopefully you've been inspired to go and pick up one of your quilts and sew. But for those of you who are fairly new, you look at that and you can't work out, is that going to be to scale or not? Get a piece of cardboard. Get your template that you're cutting around. If you're cutting 10 centimetre squares, you'll have your little 10 centimetre square template. Draw it onto a piece of card. Draw it onto a piece of card and then cut 1 centimetre inside where you've drawn, because that 1 centimetre, that's your seam allowance. So now we've got a nice clean bit of card with the size that our patch is going to be once it's been cut and sewn. Then we can get our piece of fabric. I need 3 pairs of hands today. And we've got our piece of fabric. Put the square over it, because that's the size of a patch. And you might think, actually, I don't mind a patch looking like that. If I move it here, suddenly that doesn't make sense whatsoever. I can't see enough of the original design to know what that means. It doesn't work, doesn't work. So you might think for this piece of fabric, actually it doesn't work at all. The designs are all too big. Or you might think, if I get it right there, that will still work. That's now showing you exactly where you need to cut. There might be, let's go back to this. I mean, it is fantastic. This, I think, will work. Now, you might think, that's massive, it's far too big. But again, with my little viewfinder, suddenly you think, ooh. And also, because by doing that, I've cut out the purple, I've cut out the black. Suddenly that might be a useful little piece if I'm doing reds and pinks. But let's try and get it in the wrong place. You know what, actually even that, I've chosen the wrong fabric as a demonstration because I actually really love this fabric. I just don't know what to put it with. I think one of you sent this to me. I had everything with pieces of paper inside, with dates, places. I've lost the lot. Anyway, so yeah, cut yourself a little cardboard frame like that. You know what, and don't even be embarrassed about it. Take it to the shop as well. You know, fabric is expensive. Excuse me a second. A decent cotton poplin these days, I'm finding it's about £10 a metre to start with. You don't want to make a mistake. So if you've got a piece of fabric that you really want to use, take it with you for a bit of colour matching, what have you. And take your square with you. I mean, you could cut this down a little bit so there's not so much cardboard. But I find having that much cardboard around the edge, that's useful because it really blanks out everything else. So not only that, but I also recommend you do it for the back. So my backs are cut, they are 20 centimetres square but by the time it's all sewn up, it becomes 18 centimetres square. So again, I was saying about this might work for backs, and now I'm thinking it won't, it'll work for fronts. But you see, when you put that on, you suddenly think, oh yeah, maybe I could. No, don't cut on the bias, not for this project. It might just make the decision making a little bit easier for you. Saying about the bunting, if I was looking at this though for patches, I can put it in there and I can think, I don't get enough stars per my 10 centimetres square, or I might think, actually that's enough. If I hit 3 stars as I'm cutting, that's enough. I would say though that with something like these smaller kind of vintagey ditzy flowers, the pattern repeat is really small. In other words, how many centimetres of if we're going up a roll of fabric, after 5 centimetres that pattern is being repeated, so it's a really small pattern. It just makes it easier to cut out. You don't have to, like I was saying with this one, if you decided, yeah, I would like the violets, if we're going to just cut there just to get the violets, you can see there's a lot of fabric between that's going to be wasted. I mean, you might be able to use it for something else, but there's a possibility you're going to waste a lot of fabric. Whereas with something like that, I don't need to use this. I know it's too small. I know that wherever I cut into this fabric, I'm going to get a lovely chunk of that pattern, a lovely chunk of all those colours. Just get cutting, and I can cut right from one selvage to the other, all the way down, use absolutely every centimetre of fabric. Brilliant. Was there anything else I wanted to say? I might have actually said everything I wanted to say. But yeah, I think, you know, work with the colours you love. But if you have got a load of scraps, it might be, excuse me, it might be with some of these kind of patterns that say you wouldn't actually look at those 2 purples together. I kind of love it. Anyway, if you've got a load of scraps, maybe just get them cut anyway. And so often I spend ages putting everything together. I don't mean sewing, I mean getting my fabrics working together. I adore that process. It's so beautiful, it's creative, it's lovely, it's quiet. I can spend ages and ages doing that. Stand back and then think, no, move that one over there, move that one over there. If you've got a load of scraps that maybe look a little bit clashy, get them cut into squares anyway, if quilting is your thing, or if that's what you're getting into. Just get them cut into those squares anyway. And then one afternoon, when it's raining, when it's winter and horrible, spread them out, because magic may happen. What may appear to be absolute clashing monsters together, it might just be that on the large scale they really work. But on the other hand, if you're going out to buy fabric especially, decide on your colours before you go. I mean, no, I'm trying to be strict. I was going to say stay open to being influenced when you get to the shop. But that's how we end up buying fabrics we don't really need and we're not going to use. Work out what colours you want. Take your little frames with you. And maybe to begin with, just stick with 3 or 4 different designs where the colours all work together, but then each fabric is on a slightly different scale, so that each piece has got a chance to be seen and to shine. And think about things like, if you're working with florals, can you pop a stripe in there? Of course, if you pop a stripe in, they're a beggar to cut, aren't they? You've got to cut them straight. But think about, oh, can I pop a stripe in? This isn't what I wanted, but can I pop a polka dot in? Or, as in the case with this one, can I pop a little gingham in there. Maybe think small flowers, slightly larger flowers, a polka dot and a gingham, all within one colour range, all within the right scale, and you should be away. Right, I think that was a quickie for once. I hope that was useful, interesting, inspiring. Let's be inspired to play with our fabrics and get sewing and get going. These I can't wait to use these. Let me spread them out again just briefly. These ones that were all from the same collection were a gift. I'm not using them in the lavender bags. I've got a different idea for them. For when I move home, I want to have some very plain, simple, because also the fabric will be cheaper. Even something like a calico to make curtains with, but then I want to make a patch border, maybe 15 centimetres wide all the way around with these fabrics, just to give them a little tiny pop of colour and a little bit of homey crafted loveliness. Ooh, that's for another day. I need to get on with making lavender bags. I'll see you all again really soon. I'm not sure for what, but in the meantime, happy sewing, but more than that, happy fabric painting, painting with fabrics. If you go to the fabric shop, go with a budget. Be strict with yourself. I mean, I could easily spend hundreds in a fabric shop. I don't know, I go with a budget of 100 quid, and that's to get me 10 different designs, and I'm done. Out of there, quick, get out of there. All right, until the next one, lovelies, look after yourselves. Cheerio.